Jai Guru, everyone.
Jai Guru.
And welcome to another episode of Autobiography of a Yogi, line by line. We are still on chapter 16 and we're on part 3 today. And we're joined by Priyank, Mike, and our lovely guest, Mark. So welcome all. I'm feeling very quiet today.
Thank you, Lauren. Great to be with you.
Yeah, good. So before we start, I think we should remind ourselves of what happened last episode. And for all those who need a refresh, what happened last time, Priyank?
Last time we talked long about natal charts, particularly my natal chart as a user case study. Talked about horoscopes as well, and the actual science of astrology, as Sri Yukteswar explains it beautifully. And we touched on then the subjects that naturally come, such as free will, where that free will ends and where your destiny begins, and how this paradox is handled by guruji, and essentially how you can overcome your destiny, which is our purpose. And then guruji, Sri Yukteswar, ends with using metals such as our astral bangles and plant combinations to support you and negate negative planetary pulls and influences. And there we are here.
Yes, we are ready to continue. So in this section, it starts with the line, "Sir, of course, I shall take your advice and get a bangle. I am intrigued at the thought of outwitting a planet." Yes, Priyank.
Outwitting a planet. The word outwitting, you kind of use it usually when it references to a person, outwitting a person or an entity or an organization. Like in a chess game, you might outwit your opponent. But we usually think of planets as just, matter, don't we? But here is almost personalizing a planet, personifying one. And that is subtly, I think, what Guruji is trying to do. I think Mark has found a reading about that a bit later. But a classic example, so all planets have got Devas associated with them. So the most familiar one, which each of you will know, you may have done sun salutation yoga practices, which is Surya Namaskar. Surya is the planet, the sun, and Surya Dev is the deity or the Deva or the astral angel that is in the sun, essentially, is the sun. So that is who we're actually performing our salutation for Surya Namaskar, which I think a lot of people around the world do sun salutation.
Shall we actually hear that reading that you found, Mark? It leads on really nicely from that. It talks about how it is that the planets influence us, and it's not actually the planets themselves. It is, as you say, these divine astral beings. And then it goes on to tell us the science of how it influences us. It's really interesting. Mark, sorry. Wow, that's confusing. There's 2 M's on the podcast. Mark, would you like to start reading it?
It is from the Gita, chapter 3, verse 11. All planets and stars, for example, are in charge of divine astral beings. The influence on man from the heavenly bodies is the result of a universal symbiosis, governed by laws upheld by these higher beings. Planets and stars of themselves have no conscious power to guide or determine the destiny of man, but as the whole universe consists of and is held in existence by nature's creative vibratory power, each individual unit radiates a characteristic electromagnetic vibration that links it with other units in the cosmos. Depending on the interaction, these vibrations are productive of good or ill. Man is a miniature of the universe in which he lives. His basic composition, of which his physical body is merely a gross manifestation, is his astral body, formed from the thoughts of God and structured around and from the creative forces and consciousness in the spiritual eye and the subtle cerebrospinal centers. The spiritual eye has a correspondence with the cosmic sun, and the 6, 12 bipolarity spinal centers, medullary, cervical, dorsal, lumbar, sacral, and coccygeal plexuses, correspond to planetary influences represented by the 12 zodiacal signs of astrology.
It is not the stars themselves that control the happenings in man's life, but rather his individual karma that, when ripe for fruition, is affected beneficially or adversely by electromagnetic vibrations of the heavenly bodies. The relation of the stars to the human body and mind is very subtle. The astral forces radiating to the earth from the heavens interact with those in the spinal centers that sustain man's body. Ignorant man does not realize how body and mind are changed through his good and bad actions, and how his actions affect, positively or negatively, the centers of the spine. Persons whose bodies and minds and material environment are out of order, the result of transgression of spiritual law, have inharmony between the energies in the spinal centers and those radiating from the 12 signs of the zodiac.
The true science of astrology, therefore, is mathematics of one's own actions, not the mathematics of the brainless stars. Karma governs the stars and one's destiny, but karma is governed by one's willpower. What is to be does not necessarily have to be. Man's free will and divine determination can change the course of events in his life, or at the least mitigate adverse aspects. One whose body and mind are very strong is impervious to adverse astrological influences. There may be no outwardly observable reaction at all, even when evil vibrations may be radiating from negative configuration of the stars. But if body and mind have been weakened by wrong eating, wrong thinking, bad character, and bad company, then the stellar rays have the power to activate latent harmful effects of past karma.
Wow. It's quite something, isn't
any
it?
questions, anyone?
Well,
Many.
I love how Guruji always puts the ball in our own court. It's never not our fault. Everything is always our fault. So including this, and astrology is kind of a way of creation, feeding us our karma in a way. And if we're strong enough to keep going, then it won't hamper our progress. And if we're weak, then it will play games with us. That's kind of how I understood it.
Mm. Yeah, that's what I love about Guruji. I think I said this last week too, but just how much, as you said, Mike, he reminds us that it's all to do with us, and we have that power. And we're not just victims of our own karma. We have a say.
Yeah. In reference to what Mike just said about it gives, if you're strong-willed, you can essentially overcome. But they also, like, when you have challenges, when the past has brought you challenges, those challenges are there to propel us to grow and transform through overcoming those difficulties. And had we not had those difficulties, then we wouldn't have that opportunity. We'd just be in that rut.
Yeah, they say that everything grows through friction. Even the crystalline level, the way the crystals develop is through a process of friction, and that applies to the natural world, and I guess that includes us as well, that there's no growth inside your comfort zone.
Well, you heard it here first. Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, I like that. There's no growth inside your comfort zone. Yeah, it's true. And we have to find a way to step out of it, right, and break free. And Guruji talks about being a jailbreaker from the prison of fate and how we can overcome it, and he gives this nice affirmation. Mark, would you like to read it?
I would.
We're glad.
Well, that's all right then, isn't it? This is Be a Jailbreaker from the Prison of Fate. Although life seems capricious, uncertain and full of all kinds of troubles, still we are always under the guiding, loving protection of God. We're in a sort of jail, imprisoned by the consequences of our wrong actions, but we can break out of this prison and be one with God again. Day after day you should affirm, I am the conqueror of all. I may die, but I will die free in the bosom of God. I will not remain behind the bars of bad habits, the bars of fate. This freedom will come to you if you meditate every day and strengthen your willpower. Not God, but you created the jail. You forged those bars, and so you must break them. You must be jailbreakers, breaking out of this prison of flesh.
Thank you. So, yeah, as well as our own actions and willpower, we can break free, and we can also have help along the way with bangles and other aids. So it's good we can have a mixture, right? And for this, Sri Yukteswar is advising Mukunda to get an armlet made of silver and lead instead of the usual gold, silver, and copper.
I'm going to toot my own trumpet now.
Oh, go on.
I know
We want to
this
hear the
probably-
sound,
I'll
Priyank.
probably do this very often, so this won't be news. But when I was a teenager, in school, you have to, in materials, you have to make things, right? You have to make something. And one of the things that I made was, I was obsessed by the 3 shiniest metals that were in the workshop, i.e. brass, copper, and it wasn't silver, it must have been some aluminium. That's it. Brass, copper, and aluminium, which is quite similar to the astral bangle, right? Gold, copper, and silver. In terms of appearance, it looks exactly the same. So I was so obsessed that my teacher was like, can't use this there's nothing to make here, like these are just materials we use as subsidiary things for very like electrical things and things like that. You can't make something just purely out of these. I was like, no, I'm going to. So I was like really persistent, and so what I made was my initials are PPP. I've got a middle name that's also P, and I thought, oh yeah, that's 3 and 3 and 3. So I like made a very nice font design, like piece with PPP. Each one was like brass, copper, and aluminium, and it was this 3. It was very nicely done. And I always thought, like, why was I so obsessed with this? And obviously, for the majority of my life, I knew I was going to. Well, now I know I was going to be wearing this thing. So perhaps I presaged the future. I don't know.
Do you still have it?
No, I thought I was really. Before this episode, I thought, well, let me try and find this, but my teacher must have kept it.
Oh, well, you let go. You're not being too attached of a yogi. Yeah, so I was also intrigued about the reason for the lead and silver. Priyank, do you know?
I did a bit of research on this very topic, and it relates to what we said about the stars being personifications, i.e. angels. Like a couple of lines, it says, Sri Yukteswar says a couple of lines later, the stars are about to take an unfriendly interest in you. And if you personify that, the Devas are essentially about to take a turn for the worse, essentially, and not friendly towards you. So I looked up the association of lead and silver, and lead is used to counteract the negative effects of Saturn. Saturn, the planet, is the astral body that we refer to, that is in charge of Saturn, is Shani. And Lauren, you may remember reading my natal chart last week. We saw that in my natal chart it said Shani is going to obstruct this boy, and this is pretty much exactly, I think, what has happened here, which is why Sri Yukteswar is telling him to have lead, because lead is a counter counterweight to Shani. And also, what also could be true is there's another entity called Rahu. So Shani, if you look up, I'll put a link to it. But if you look up Shani, is actually a deity, and there's some temples in India dedicated to Shani, and there is temples dedicated to Surya, which is the sun, etc. And the other negative influence that lead and silver are countered by is well, the force is Rahu, and Rahu is like a ghost planet. It's like this ghost pull, which is created by the position of the moon when it enters the ecliptic point in its cycle with the Earth. Then Rahu, there's this planetary force called the Rahu, and there's another deity that's generated. And lead is also useful for countering that force. And with that one, just bear that one in mind, because we're going to talk about that a bit later, because there's a hint in a few paragraphs about the importance or Sri Yukteswar's acknowledgement of that that force. And Saturn, the reason why Shani comes up in natal charts often, and it's always a negative, it's often a negative force in the progress of one's life, is because it's got an orbit of like 29.5 years around the sun, so a very long orbit. So like Jupiter's got 12 years, and every 12 years we have the Kumbh Mela, but Saturn has got an even longer. So whenever the Shani comes into one's life, it's there for a very long period of time. And that's why astrologers advise that, you know, you're going to be suffering for a long time, and hence do something about it. And lead is obviously one of the things that Sri Yukteswar has asked. And silver apparently is like a calming and a cooling kind of force in this equation, which is probably why he said hybrid. But again, this is all my theorizing. I don't know. You know, Sri Yukteswar hasn't really gone to this level of detail, I don't think, in any of our writings, but in Hindu kind of law, these kind of things are there.
Well, that's fascinating, Priyank. Huh. I've got something here that was by Taramata, and she's talking about how the metals correspond to the ages that we're in, and that the Bronze Age, how it corresponds to the electrical era, because it's an alloy, chiefly copper, it says, and due to its excellent conductivity and rust-resisting properties, that this is why it's such a cornerstone of the electrical industry in this era. But also iron is ruled by Saturn, so the Kali Yuga is connected to that, which is the heavy planet of limitation, which we're clearly having trouble getting out of at the moment, and was the most important metal during those 2 ages. But on the way up, she talks about copper and bronze being under the rulership of the cooperative planet of Venus, and during upcoming centuries in this yuga, we can reasonably expect to see a practical realization of the ideal of the brotherhood of man.
Which was that in a magazine, or where was that?
No, in a book about astrological cycles.
Ooh.
But the Silver Age will be ruled by the moon, and the Golden Age by the sun. So silver moon, golden sun.
Sounds nice. Can we get there already? So I'm intrigued then. Going to what you said, Priyank, about lead being so useful. Why then do you think that lead isn't in the astrological bangles that we wear?
So this gold, silver, and copper is for general use, right? So this is going to be beneficial for regardless of
all the time
who know what a person's natal chart says in terms of the constellatory and planetary influences. But I think Mukunda had a similar thing that I had in my natal chart, which was that Shani is going to be take a negative turn, and hence the lead just specifically for Saturn. But you may not have that in your natal chart, so
Let's hope not.
you wearing lead may be useless, or actually it may not be a good thing. You may be attracting something that you shouldn't.
Exactly. Yeah. Did you ever wear anything with lead in it to try
No, I've never.
Oh, wow.
But I am supposed to do various rituals to counter this this force, but they didn't, and no one's told me about lead, I must say, other than Sri Yukteswar. But he hasn't said it directly. If he'd said it directly, then I would do it, i.e. if it directly applied. But I'm kind of inferring a lot, and I obviously could be wrong, couldn't I?
Have you felt the presence of this force?
No. In my mind, I thought ever since I started, because my mum used to make me do it religiously, like virtually every week, this ritual. But ever since I started doing Kriya, I thought, surely this trumps any ritual that I need to do. And I just kind of stopped anything such as that. And I thought maybe, hopefully Guruji and Sri Yukteswarji will help me in overcoming whatever planetary influences are there for me. With faith.
Yeah, and your own good actions. As we know from Guruji, that has a massive impact on that and the planet. So, it could well be that through your devoted efforts that, you're not being affected by the planetary influence. So
what do you guys think is more important here, that he does what his guru says, or that he actually puts a bangle on? Like, is it really scientific, or is it really about doing God's will and then God's grace will help you? Like, if he would have read in a magazine to take that bangle, would it have had the same effect? Did you guys think about that? Because I always wonder, if you do something without the guidance of a guru, if it's even I don't know if it's even that interesting.
I think that's a great point, Mike. I think there's elsewhere that Lahiri Mahashaya talks about you can take this balm or this medicine or not, but if it makes you feel better, but it's not actually. And
also sapphires, right? Yeah, exactly.
Right, so if it's Sri Yukteswar, then obviously,
That's right.
My younger brother-in-law, who Mike, and I were having a debate yesterday about something very similar to this. So we're debating about general counsel that gurus give to disciples, i.e. if there's a satsang and he just said, something that everyone should do, i.e. something that's in the lessons, all of us should be following what's in the lessons, right? But obviously we don't follow everything, or we don't follow it to the extent that we should. That's my case anyway. I don't know about the three of you. But then I was saying, what is the difference between him writing in a lesson, or if he was in person and he told you directly that you need to do this, that, or the other? Is there a difference? Because technically there shouldn't be a difference. The lesson applies to all of us. But if he directly told you, Priyanka, do this, Michael, do this, then I would be like, yeah, of course, yeah, he told me directly, and I'd be like really religious about doing it. But obviously that's a flaw in my my faith, really, because I should be doing that with everything he says in the lessons.
Mike, what do you think?
Oh, okay. I mean, I find the lessons are the next best thing to Guruji telling me directly. I think we talked, it's been a while now, but we talked about which direction you should sleep in, right? And I read that lesson, something that I forgot about, that if you sleep north, then you get an early death or something. And I was like, oh, maybe I should not, maybe I should not be doing that. So I took that as gospel. Whereas astrology is something that I find you get that from all kinds of sources. So not necessarily the lessons, could have been some Wikipedia page or something.
So Mike, which way should we sleep? I don't think I was here for that.
So I think East and South are the good ones. I think East was spiritual unfoldment and South was wisdom, right?
Oh.
So I think those are the good ones.
Is that with your head facing? Or
Yeah, with your
which
head,
way?
yeah. Your head facing that direction, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And I was
Interesting.
sleeping north for like a year and a half here in my apartment, and then I was like, oh man, I should not do that.
Where did you read it?
Now it's kind of, the problem is my apartment is not aligned to the true north, so
It's
You
all
want
good.
to speak to your landlord about that, Mike?
So it's like somewhere between south and east.
Okay.
That's pretty good. Yeah,
Where did you find out this information?
in the lessons.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
I can
Okay.
send it to you later. Yeah,
Thank you.
I got the
Okay.
page taken a picture.
Wow.
Yeah.
Goodness. Well, I was figuring out in my head, do I need to move my bed? No, I'm good. I couldn't if I tried. Priyank, in answer to your question, something that came to mind straight away, and that Guruji said, when I'm gone, the teachings will be the guru. So I read the lessons as if that's exactly what he wants me to do. And if we're in tune enough, sometimes we get an intuition about something that we should or shouldn't be doing. And then that is, if that is untainted by our own thoughts or feelings, then of course, then that is a direct guidance, isn't it, from him? But yeah, I take the lessons as if, or because it is, to me at least, him speaking to all of us.
But if he did tell you directly, would you respond more deeply and instantly?
Probably, which is the wrong attitude to have, right? Because
Well,
really,
but I think
the-
it's kind of understandable.
We're
yeah, it's
human.
understandable,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it's not the right attitude. The right attitude is to soak up everything we read.
Well,
For me.
similarly, like don't meditate alone, right? Always have the
Mm,
guru there.
yeah. Yeah.
But the ideals are pretty tough, like,
Yeah,
aren't they?
they're
His
yeah.
standards are
Yeah, he sets the bar very
through
high.
the roof. Like the classic one is make each meditation deeper than your last.
Oof.
And if you how many of us, I'm sure none of us can, but if we just did that, like, I'm sure it'd only take a few days.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, he does set the bar very high. But for a good reason, right? If it's very high, then if we aim for it, even when we fall short, we're still okay.
But didn't he also say if we do like a millionth of what he asks us to do, we'll find God? Which is not a
I was
cop
just
out. Sorry,
I was
Mike.
just gonna say the same thing, Mark. Yeah, that's a saving grace we have.
Yeah, I'm not excusing myself, by the way.
Much. But here we have Guruji taking a very active interest on what his guru is telling him to do and acting on it straight away. And as Priyank said, Sri Yukteswar tells him that the stars are about to take an unfriendly interest in him, but he should fear not, he'll be protected, which must have been a very comforting couple of words to hear. And then he gives him a prediction that in a month, his liver will cause him much trouble, and it's scheduled to last for 6 months. But because you will use your astrological armlet, it will shorten the period to 24 days. So here, Guruji just goes straight. He buys the bangle, and the next day, and he's wearing it, and his health is really good, and he soon forgets all about the prediction.
Good. I like the numbers there, I must say. The ratio of reduction of suffering is I like it. But Guruji's given Mukunda essentially quite bad news, really, isn't it? You're going to suffer from something that's going to be quite horrific, even if it is 24 days. That's still quite a long time, isn't it? 3.5 weeks. But I was going back to our question previously. Perhaps Mike and Mark can have some way in here. Why would astrologers and in this case, Sri Yukteswar as well, gives someone bad news. Like in this case, Mukunda didn't really even like debate this. He didn't really respond to this. He just said, "Yeah, I'll get one," didn't he? He didn't respond to this bad news in any way, but it must have impacted him. Really, you'd think it would have, because it is bad news, and he was Mukunda back then. He wasn't Paramahansa Yogananda, right? So I was just wondering what if you guys had any thoughts on why bad news expressly, because Sri Yukteswar didn't need to say that you can have a horrific illness, right? You could have just said you need to do this because you're going to go through a tough time, for example.
I mean, in the end, he wrote a whole chapter about outwitting the stars. So I think Sri Yukteswar really wanted to bring home the point about astrology, that it's a law and that it's there. Doesn't mean we have to live by it, but he did want to make this point here, I think, that we need to be aware of astrology. And I mean, I still find this incredible. Like you said, the ratio is amazing. I mean, you put like a little bangle on your arm, and suddenly from 6 months you go down to 24 days. I don't think in my lifetime we will be able to verify this like scientifically, but the fact that this is there, and if you're a spiritual seeker, you take any shortcut that you can, right, on the spiritual path. And I think this definitely looks like a low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, low-hanging bangles. Though I thought it was it was going to happen anyway. So he was forewarned is forearmed, isn't it? So I would rather he told me that this is going to happen and this is what you can do about it. And as it was, didn't Mukunda just kind of the prediction slipped from his mind, so he can't have been that upset or anxious about it.
No,
it's only when it kicked in that he realised he should do something about it. But astrology has a kind of bad or a weird press in the West, doesn't it? And I think that certainly when I heard read about Sri Yukteswar and this chapter and him reframing it as a science, it made it a lot more kind of cut to the truth of it. We're past all of the nonsense that we read in the West about it, that this is really something going on. And the fact that he advises him to get bangles, and that they're taking it seriously, you think, oh, well, there really is something going on here. That if we're all swimming in an ocean of electromagnetism, if that's what's going on in space, if that's how the planets communicate with each other and with us and with our chakras, and then it kind of it makes sense to have bangles and to like take the thing more seriously than certainly I had before I read this. Yeah, anyway, if Sri Yukteswar says it, then it's serious.
yeah.
Yeah. And as we know from the autobiography, he has such a perception of truth. So many things happen that he's aware of and that he speaks about, and they come true. And just like all the other times, this time it's also another example of when he predicts something or he gets a direct knowledge of it and he expresses it through his words and it comes true. So what happens next is that Sri Yukteswar left Serampore to visit Banaras, and then 30 days after they'd had this conversation, Mukunda felt a sudden pain in his liver. And he says that the weeks following were a nightmare of excruciating pain. But he didn't want to disturb Sri Yukteswar, and he, thought he'd try to bravely endure his trial alone. Which I found kind of interesting because, you know, it made me think about Guruji saying how we should always bring God into every season of our lives, in the summers and in the winters, and how that also is true for our Guru, right? Whatever we go through in life, we should bring him with us and let him walk beside us. But here, Wakunda's like got this resolve, like, no, I can do this. Mark, what do you think?
In reference to what we were talking about the other episode about Sri Yukteswar setting things up for the purposes of education, did he do this as well here, do you think? Because he said it was going to be 24 days. And looking at this, it kind of seems like Guruji, did he know that did he remember that there were 24 days and on the 23rd day he decided to do something about it? Or did his resolution just weaken on the 23rd day? Or, you know, did Sri Yukteswar set that whole thing up that you'll be back then so I can show you how this thing works?
It's a good question. I don't know. What's the answer? I wish I knew.
I'm disappointed now.
I know. I feel like it wasn't set up. But then again, Sri Yukteswar is Sri Yukteswar. He can do anything. So who's to say? But it's a good thought. But either way, the prediction happens just as he says it. And Guruji says the 23 days of torture weakened his resolution. And so he entrained for Banaras. Yeah, Priyank.
I think he may have been going to Benares because his mother was there. And this whole episode may have taken it at his mother's home, perhaps. We don't know. So.
Can I just say one of the things I love about the autobiography is how everybody is always in training for somewhere or other.
Yeah.
And it started creeping into my own conversation. I'm just going to entrain to the kitchen and make a cup of tea.
It's a great word.
They actually took a train though, Mark. You took a train.
Does that what it mean? Is that what it actually means, that he got on a train?
I'm guessing so. Because that's the principal method of travel back then, especially interstate, because he would have been coming from Calcutta to Serampore, and that's a very long journey by horse carriage.
Yeah, the definition of entrain is board a train.
So, you know, Mark, when you said I always use it, I thought you were going to say I'm in training to the London Centre.
No, but I will now.
Unless you got one of those toy town railways inside your home that takes you into the kitchen from your office.
Well, can you see from there?
Darjeeling Express.
I like the Simla Railway or something.
It does
Great
also
movie.
say on the dictionary that a rare version of entrain is enthusiasm or animation. So I guess if you're enthusiastically going somewhere, you can entrain to the kitchen for a midnight snack.
That is the place where you would entrain, though, isn't it? If you're gonna be, if it's gonna be anywhere, it wouldn't be the living room; it would be the kitchen.
Yeah.
For some biscuits or something, Priyank.
Yeah, crisps.
Oh, crisps. Oh, you're on the crisps.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we had a chat about that last podcast afterwards, didn't we? me, Priyank, and Chris talking about crisps. Anywho, we digress. So he entrains, he gets on the train to Banaras, and Sri Yukteswar was there, and he greets him with an unusual warmth, which begs the question of how did he usually greet him, I wonder. But he didn't give him any opportunity to tell him what was going on, and many people visited Sri Yukteswar that day just for darshan. And there's a footnote here which says that darshan means the blessing that flows from the mere sight of a saint.
And we also use this word for when you go to a temple to see a deity, you must sometimes wait in line for hours or days, and then you get darshan. And to see Lahiri Mahashai's home, some people wait overnight, and some people have to wait the whole year because it's only open during the Guru Puja day, so once a year. So yeah, darshan also for temples and stuff is the same thing, but in that case, it's the consecrated and charged deity, whether it's a linga or a deity of Krishna or any Ganapati, Ganesha, or anyone like that.
I think I'm gonna blow my own trumpet now, because
Ooh.
I find that also one of the cheat codes, spiritual path, the darshan. Whenever you have the chance to see go to a holy site or something. And yesterday I had an all-day conference in San Diego, and of course in the morning I went to Encinitas. The grounds were closed, but I was there in the morning, and I feel like, I don't know why, but somehow then you feel better about your spiritual life and everything when you have an experience like that. So I find that's another one of the things that if you can do it, one should always do it.
Guruji recommends that, doesn't he? Taking pilgrimages to nourish and uplift us spiritually. And also, if I'm correct in remembering, when we take Kriya, that's also darshan, isn't it? Is that correct?
Can't remember.
I may have misremembered, but I thought it was, even though he's not there in the physical body.
Is Diksha kind of darshan? Is that what you're saying?
Maybe I've misremembered, but I will look it up, my homework, and come back next week.
I mean, it kind of makes sense though, if they're present at a Kriya ceremony, which they are, then
you might not see them, but they will see you.
But they'll see you anyway.
You didn't see them?
Well, all right, Craig, we're not as advanced as you.
Okay.
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 I kid.
Craig's like, I can see them all right now.
Yeah.
Know what you guys are talking about. One day. And then Guruji says, ill and neglected, I sat in a corner. Oh, it's such a sorry sight, isn't it? And then it wasn't till after the evening meal, that when everyone had gone, that Sri Yukteswar then summoned him to the octagonal balcony, which is in the house.
I think it's all humility by Mukunda, trying not to bother him, and then coming there and trying not to disturb him. So he doesn't waltz in there and say, "You have to help me. I feel terrible." But he's just waiting for him until he has time for him.
Yeah, so true. And then
is that born of the knowledge and the faith that he knows Sri Yukteswar is going to sort it out for him?
What do you think, Mike?
I don't know, but it's definitely, he doesn't demand it. He is more like asking for it. Yeah.
Just like patiently waits, doesn't he? For his guru to speak to him. And then it's quite something, actually, isn't it? You know, how many of us would do the same? Don't know. And then when Sri Yukteswar does talk to him, the first thing he says is, "You must have come about your liver disorder." And he wasn't even looking at him, and he was just walking to and fro, intercepting the glow of the moonlight.
I think that's a very pertinent point, intercepting the moonlight. And the reason for that is because I remember I told you two forces may have been influencing Mukunda. One was Shani, Saturn, and one was Rahu. Rahu is the eclipse. The eclipse, yeah, it's like a, how do you call it? It's like the moon, where its orbit intercepts the ecliptic point. So when the eclipse happens, so there's a whole story about Rahu. Rahu is a demon in mythology, in Hindu mythology, that was beheaded by Vishnu, but he's known, and his force like kind of gives the eclipse of either the sun or the moon to the earth, and so it's like this dark kind of energy. And there could have this is one of the other reasons why you wear or why sometimes astrologers tell you to wear lead, because if you're so sensitive to this, then it really causes you imbalance, etc. So, but here, if you look, it says before this healing, yeah, it literally says Sri Yukteswar was occasionally intercepting the moonlight. Now, it's like one of those things that you can just skip this, right? But if you do a bit of, not skip it, you don't think anything of it. It's just like a nice scene, you know, moonlight scene. But every word is deliberate, occasionally intercepting and the moonlight. So that literally mimics what Rahu does in terms of its negative influence, in terms of its ecliptic energy and what the whole mythology is around it. So I think the healing and what Sri Yukteswar was doing, mystically doing, because he is a mystic, is physically intercepting the moon from Mukunda. And I think his healing, this was a key part of his healing and his manipulating of the forces as to what was about to transpire.
Interesting. Isn't there another polarity with that? Isn't it Ketu? Is Ketu up there involved in that?
Could be. I
Rahu
don't.
and Ketu.
Have to look it up.
Huh.
Yeah, it's there. But it's usually that's usually the positive
Yeah.
balance. Yeah, so yeah, Ketu is the positive influence of one of wisdom, etc. Gives light.
That's a great
darkness.
insight.
Yeah.
That's like a kind of Kurukshetra kind of bit of layering going on.
I think the whole autobiography is filled with this stuff, and maybe some of the times we're just reading more into it. Well, that's us on this podcast reading more of it into it than other times. But I think sometimes we must be on some, because he must hide some teachings, and therefore those that are especially keen, but also those that aren't really ready to hear that level of for example, Guruji didn't talk about the demon Rahu, really, did he? And Vishnu beheading this demon, because it opens a whole can of worms, right? But if he just writes this mystic, cryptic little line, some people may infer the whole narrative, rightly or wrongly.
Some people, such as you.
Sorry, Lawrence.
No, go on. Yeah.
And he also wraps it up in this lovely wry sense of humor that Sri Yukteswar has. When he says, well, first of all, he greeted him with unusual warmth because, I know why you're here. And then he doesn't do anything about it. Then later, much later, he just says, you must have come about your liver disorder, just casually walking up and down. But actually, there's that phrase in the middle of it as well. Huh.
And it's quite jumping ahead a little bit with this comment, but it's quite telling that Sri Yukteswar waits until everyone else is gone to do the healing, because I can imagine, at first I thought, oh, I wonder why he didn't do it straight away when Mukunda arrived and sort of relieved him of his misery. But then if crowds had been there, that would have granted him unwanted, perhaps, attention of the healing that happened to him, to Mukunda, through Sri Yukteswar, and perhaps in his humbleness, not wanting to make a show of that. So they wait until everyone else is gone, and the moon is shining in the night, and it's just those two on the balcony, and then they have this conversation, and he says, "Oh, you've been unwell for 24 days, haven't you?" And he says, "Yes." And then he asks him to do the stomach exercise. And Mukunda says, "If you knew the extent of my suffering, Master, you would not ask me to exercise." But
do you think this is the same exercise that we have to do in
I did wonder.
section?
Yeah, it could well be. Could well be.
I was
a
pretty
newfound
sure.
reverence.
Yeah.
Can you imagine how painful that would be if you had some sort of stomach?
Yeah. But even though he says that, he still makes, as he writes, a feeble attempt to obey him. I've been guilty of this,
shouldn't
making
laugh.
feeble attempts to obey Guruji.
You shouldn't laugh, but he put comical wording in there, so he
Yeah.
wants us to smile, I suppose.
Yeah.
It's a bit similar to when he had, I think it was a cholera when he was a kid, and then he bowed before the picture of Lahiri Mahashaya mentally because he couldn't do it physically.
Yeah.
The thought that counts.
Yeah,
Mm.
he and in other places of the autobiography, he demands an intercession, right?
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
And here, Sri Yukteswar is written occasionally intercepting the moonlight, so he's kind of interceding with Rahu probably to stop this from happening, maybe.
But then,
You know, good.
sorry.
Oh, no, go. This is a separate point. You go.
But then Rahu is still like an anthropomorphization of something else, isn't it? Rahu it's actually just an energy that has been mythologized into a character.
Well, it's a being. Now Rahu, I understood him to be a being.
An actual being.
So Deva is a positive, essentially a positive, and the opposite of a Deva is like a Rakshas. And so those are people like Ravana in the law, and Rahu would be another one, and Shani is another one where it's a negative pull. So it's a being.
But not metaphorical, but
It's how you. Some people would say it's an actual being, and like there's temples dedicated to some of these beings in India. So if it's metaphorical, then you wouldn't create a deity for these beings. But when you see the wiki link that I've put on there, you'll see that each of these forms has a actual physical form or a picture.
In the way that the brothers in the Gita correspond to the different characteristics and senses.
That was like dual, though, right? So in that, Yogananda says that the author was like an expert. He built the whole yoga science into an actual war that actually happened. So not only did it happen and these people existed, but the names related to all these deeper, yogic things like the brothers' names that you mentioned, and all the different characters in the Mahabharata, and in the family of the Pandavas and Dhritarashtra's family.
Huh.
It's so interesting, all this stuff. We can literally talk about it for hours, but we won't. Not today. But yeah, this sort of attempt at obedience is really quite touching, particularly given his physical torment. And it again reminds us, I feel reminds us to be obedient and loyal to our guru, whatever he asks. We could do it with the same way as he did with his guru. And there's actually a reading from the Divine Romance on obedience. Mike, would you like to read it out?
Obedience to the guru is the surest way when one is seeking God. Master, Swami Sri Yukteswar, first told me what to do, and afterwards he gave the reasons. I found him unerring in his wisdom. By listening to him, I saved myself many incarnations of roaming and trying to find out truth by myself. Guru is he who has experienced truth. He serves as a guide in the dark forest of life. If you follow him, he will lead you out of the darkness. If you try to find the way alone, you may needlessly lose yourself in the forest for many incarnations. So follow the guru, and he will take you through safely. Amen.
Beautiful. Yeah, amen. Yeah. I was reading God Alone the other night, and one of the letters, Yanamata says, "Willingness never fails me, and wings grow upon my heels at the sound of your beloved voice." She was describing about how whenever he calls her or asks her to do something, she, goes straight away.
There's a good example here. So we know that energization is a healing force, right? And so say we had an ailment such as this, and we've even got the example where Sri Yukteswar is actually telling him to do this exercise. I'm sure not many of us would actually do this exercise, but if Sri Yukteswar is in front of us and telling us to do it, then we too would make this feeble attempt. I don't know. What do you think? Would you put yourself through? You're already in excruciating pain, and just because you read in the lessons and because you've seen Sri Yukteswar say it, would you increase your pain because of your faith? You would if he was in front of you, that's for sure.
Would you dare not to?
I would. I'm saying I don't think I would because my faith must not be strong enough, because I respond to my pain stimulus, right? If I'm in excruciating pain and doing this exercise is going to make it worse, then I don't have the strength to make it worse, do I? I'm just trying to heal myself.
How do
I
you
know
know it'll
that-
make it worse?
That's the point, though. It's easy. It is very easy to say, but you can
Mm.
actually feel the pain, so you'll feel it getting worse, right? If you did this, if you had this issue, you'll feel the pain will physically get worse, as it was for Mukunda. He made a feeble attempt, so you'd have to have quite a lot of faith to do it, especially if Sri Yukteswar wasn't in front of you. In this case, he's in front of Mukunda, or Guruji is in front of. If he was in front of us, then it was easy to say that he would. Anyway, I'm just having a, playing devil's advocate.
That's good. Mike, what do you think?
It's difficult when you're actually in pain. You might not act. You might reduce your actions to whatever helps you and not care about anything else. I remember as a kid, when you have devotee parents, they give you advice that is oftentimes not what you think. Like, my dad was never recommending, oh yeah, you should take a painkiller. He was always saying, oh, you should drink water, do energization exercises, and I don't know, try to go to fresh air, meditate. And when you're actually in pain, you don't want to hear this. and hate it, right? So I can totally sympathize with Priyank's point here, that this is like an act of real, like showing your faith to your guru under difficult circumstances, not to be dismissed.
But
Mark, what do you
it
think?
isn't it because it's him though?
Yeah.
If my parents had told me that, I'd be right with you. But if it was Sri Yukteswar, then
Fair.
because it also sets it up for the next little exchange between them, where he's clearly in pain and he's going, well, that's just what you think, which is, I guess, a whole other conversation, isn't it?
Well, we know what the SRF line would be for this, right? Like if you went to a monastic and said, I've got this 10 out of 10 intense pain in my stomach, and I've read in this Autobiography of Yogi and the lessons that I can do the stomach exercise. Should I do it? The SRF's line is seek medical professional and follow their advice. They won't take liability and say, oh, do the exercise, Guriji. They're not gonna. They wouldn't. They'd say seek medical advice, don't they? With actually everything.
But that's the US, though, isn't it? You have to.
But even Guruji says, doesn't he, don't negate doctors. They can help you. God still works through them as well. So, don't wait to become so in tune that you can heal yourself. If you can get someone to fix your broken arm, then let them help you. But I mean, the exercises are there for a reason, and in the lessons there is actually a section about, if you've got specific ailments or things that are bothering you, how to deal with them, and they work and they're very powerful. So I guess we have to use our judgment on where we're at in ourselves. You know, someone may be able to do the exercise and it heals them, and another person may not, and that's fine. You know, we just have to go with where we're at, right? But Mukunda's at a very special place because he's with Sri Yukteswar in person. Lucky him. And after he's made his, quote, feeble attempt, end quote, Sri Yukteswar comes out with this line, like a mic drop of a line. And he says, "You say you have pain. I say you have none. How can such contradictions exist?" And he looks at him inquiringly. And then Mukunda is dazed and then overcome with this joyful relief. And he couldn't feel the torment anymore. And at Sri Yukteswar's words, the agony vanished as though it had never been.
There's such gravity in those words, isn't there?
Yeah.
It's like the words in themselves, like, or just if you just split the sentence into, you know, little parts, there isn't much there. It's just they're pretty words that even a child could use. But them together, you can't help but say it with the kind of impact. You can feel the impact even if you read it mentally. Like Lauren probably didn't rehearse reading it so beautifully as she just did, but it just sounded absolutely fantastic. Like it was moving. The reading is moving, even if you don't attempt to you know, put any diction or any emphasis in any of the words. But it's just a phenomenal set of words together, isn't it? It's like it starts with a kind of rhetorical question. You say you have pain, and then he's kind of negating that, saying you don't have the pain, and then saying that contradiction can't exist. It's just a knockout blow, as you could describe it.
It's like a mathematical formula, is what he's saying. For all miracles, this is how they work. You think this, but get a load of this. What do you think about that? And you can't. What can you do? He's just like indicating the higher science that he's got access to, isn't he? Just in that phrase. Yeah, it's just, there are moments in this book when, well, the whole thing's a moment, isn't it? But there are phrases and that just blow me away. There's another one on the couple of pages before when he's talking, when he says, you know, it's not a question of belief. When he says that, it's that same sort of, like you say, there's so much and there's so much gravity in that. But it's beautiful because in all of that, he heals him instantaneously. It's not just a formula. He actually does. He does, you know, infuses it with love and healing, doesn't he?
Yeah. And it also kind of reminds me of the power of the mind as well. You know, if you believe you have pain, if you believe that you are ill or tired or fatigued, then you are so, because you experience the world as the mind tells you, right? And like the opposite, Guruji says, never say that you're tired. You know, always affirm that you're full of energy and vitality and you're healthy and well. And even if sickness comes, you just keep, I'm well, you know, the body as well. So it reminds me of that in a way too, that, you know, yeah, you say that, but I say this, you know. And yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? The healing that happens, and there's no sort of miraculous light or, you know, nothing crazy visual happens. It just through the words, that alone is enough.
For our listeners in India, I just checked the Hindi version of this book, and I advise you also to read this section in the Hindi. It's as powerful in the native tongues as it is in English.
One day, when my studies have taken me far enough, I'll be able to read it in Hindi. Ah. And then after this happens, Guruji, kneels at his feet in gratitude. Well, he starts to, but Sri Yukteswar prevents him very quickly. And he says, "Don't be childish. Get up and enjoy the beauty of the moon over the Ganges." But his master's eyes were twinkling happily as he stood beside him. And Guruji says that he understood that his attitude was because he wanted him to feel that it was God that was the doer and the healer and not him. And that Guruji wears that bangle even to this day. He said, "I wear even now the heavy silver and lead bangle, a memento of that day, long past, ever cherished, when I found anew that I was living with a personage indeed superhuman." That's probably how it felt for those in the ashram with Guruji, I imagine.
Do you think there's I don't know what the phrase is about the moon, Priyank, from intercepting the moonlight? Now they're just enjoying the beauty of the moon.
Yeah, I think Rahul's forces have been countered. He's downed. Rahul's downed his weapons, downed his arms. Yeah, I read that as well, and I reckon it must be there because as soon as he says that, then the master's eyes twinkled, and whenever there's a twinkle moment in the Autobiography of Yogi, if you read the word twinkle anywhere, you'll see that there's definitely something more than what you're reading in those lines. And often it's really obvious, like one of the gurus is their eyes are twinkling because they know, something that the person doesn't know, or that he's interceded in some way, or along those lines. But yeah, there's a really good word search. Just go through the Autobiography searching twinkle, and you'll see every single time there's something phenomenal that's happened. And that one, and the word silent as well, that's another one. Like, we sat in silence for a while, and if that's happened, then something amazing. Some gurus said something phenomenal, or so that's another good reason to get the Kindle version of the book, because you can do word searches super easily, and then make notes on them and refer back to the notes and stuff.
That's great.
Ever the student, Priyank, very inspiring. So I wonder what's going to happen next in the chapter. Mike, could you tell us?
Yeah, I shall. The next chapter, we talk more about astrology, and it's more, so this is I feel like the first section of this chapter, we get stories where we see how powerful astrology is. And now Guruji also shows the other side of the coin, where he says there are people who are sequaciously attached to astrology. And then he mentions the example that he is supposed to get married 3 times, twice a widower, which doesn't sound great. And then, of course, he brings back his good friend, his older brother Ananta, who then tells him, "Yes, Mukunda, this is what's going to happen no matter what you do." And Mukunda, in Mukunda fashion, takes a scroll with the prediction and burns it, puts it in a jar and leaves a message on it, and says that the seeds of past karma cannot germinate if they are roasted in the fire of divine wisdom. And I don't know if he does that just to show Ananta, because I love their interactions. They're always amazing. And so he says he has a conviction that the prophecies are false. And he then goes on, and he even says that, I don't know if it's to spite astrology or astrologers, but he occasionally asks astrologers to tell him, when is my worst time going to be? And he then tried to just carry on his life just as if it wouldn't be like that. So he just ignored it and worked through it. And he said there are those moments where he feels astrology is against him right now, but he's just powering through it. And that's essentially what the next part of the chapter will be about.
Thank you, Mike. Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
And so I guess that brings this episode to a close. Mark, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you all for having me on again. It's great. Loved it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good.
Great to have you,
Hopefully,
Mark.
Lovely
hopefully
to
you can
see
come
you,
back
Mike.
again.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Yes.
And thank you, Priyanka and Mike.
And thank you,
another
Lauren.
Yeah.
session.
Thank you,
Welcome.
Lauren. Yeah.
Thank you all for listening. And we will meet again next time. Bye, everyone.
Jai Guru.